In 1994, Toys R Us controlled 25% of all toy sales in America. Walk into any mall from Seattle to Miami, and there it was. Aisles stretching so far they disappeared. Walls of toys stacked 12 feet high. Jeffrey the Giraffe standing watch at the entrance. The jingle played everywhere. I don't want to grow up, I'm a Toys R Us kid. Every child knew those words. For 50 years, Toys R Us was childhood. Then in 2005, 3 investment firms bought the company for $6.6 billion. But here's the thing. They didn't use their own money, they borrowed it. Then they put that debt, over $5 billion, onto Toys R Us itself. It was like buying a house with someone else's credit card, then handing them the bill. For 12 years, Toys R Us paid nearly $500 million every single year just in interest. Not improving stores, not competing with Amazon, just paying interest on money they never borrowed. The 3 firms collected over $470 million in fees while Toys R Us bled. This is the story of one of the greatest cons in American retail. In 1948, a man named Charles Lazarus ran a baby furniture store in Washington, D.C. that his father had started. The store sold cribs, high chairs, and strollers. Business was steady, but unremarkable. Charles spent his days helping young parents furnish nurseries. He knew the inventory, he knew the suppliers, and he knew exactly how many cribs he could sell in a month. One afternoon, a young mother walked in carrying a baby. She browsed the cribs, running her hand along the rails and checking the prices. Charles approached her. "Can I help you find something?" She smiled. "I'm fine with the furniture. I was just wondering, where do I buy toys for when she's older?" Charles paused. He had never thought about it. "I don't know," he said honestly. She nodded. "Nobody does." That conversation stuck with him. He thought about it for days, then weeks. At the time, toy shopping in America was scattered and inefficient. Department stores carried limited selection, usually just the biggest sellers. Small toy shops were expensive and their inventory changed based on whatever the owner could get. Mail order catalogs took weeks to deliver. Parents had nowhere to go that offered variety, low prices, and convenience all in one place. Charles saw an opportunity. The name came with a backwards R, designed to look like a child had written it. The concept was revolutionary for its time. Apply the supermarket model to toys. Make the store enormous, stock every toy you could find. Let customers serve themselves instead of asking clerks to retrieve items from behind counters, and keep prices low through volume. The store was huge, 10,000 square feet. For context, most toy shops at the time were maybe 1,000 square feet. Charles wanted parents to feel overwhelmed by choice. He wanted kids to walk in and see more toys than they knew existed. It worked immediately. Within a few years, he opened more locations. The format was always the same: massive warehouse-style buildings, self-service, huge selection, and low prices. By the early 1960s, Toys R Us was expanding into shopping malls that were spreading across suburban America. The timing was perfect. The baby boom generation was having children of their own, suburbs were growing, and malls were becoming the social centers of American life. Toys R Us became an anchor tenant that malls fought to attract. Charles Lazarus understood something crucial. Toys were not seasonal. Yes, Christmas was enormous, but birthdays happened year-round. Parents needed gifts constantly. If you built a store big enough and stocked it well enough, customers would come back again and again. He was right. By 1970, Toys R Us was the dominant toy retailer in America. Through the 1970s and 1980s, Toys R Us exploded. The company opened stores in every major city and every suburb with a mall. The buildings became landmarks. Kids recognized that backwards R from the highway. When you saw it, you knew exactly what was inside. The stores were designed to be overwhelming: 30,000 square feet, 40,000, and some grew to 60,000 square feet. That is bigger than most grocery stores, entire football fields of toys. You walked through automatic doors and the scale hit you immediately. Aisles stretching in every direction, shelves 12 feet high, and employees with ladders pulling down boxes from the top. It was not organized like a boutique. It was organized like a warehouse because it was a warehouse. But that was the appeal. You could find anything. Obscure action figures, discontinued board games, the specific doll your daughter wanted that no other store carried. If it existed, Toys R Us probably had it. Saturday mornings became a ritual. Families piled into station wagons and drove to the mall. The kids had been talking about this trip all week. They had lists, they had plans. Parents knew they would leave with something, even if it was not everything the kids wanted. The store was designed to encourage this. Shopping carts were enormous, built to hold multiple large toys. The checkout lanes were positioned at the back of the store, forcing you to walk past every aisle. Employees wore red shirts and name tags. Many of them worked there for decades. They knew the regulars, they knew which toys were popular and which ones broke immediately. And they could tell parents honestly what was worth buying. That personal knowledge mattered. Toys R Us was not just cheap. It was reliable. You trusted it. By 1990, Toys R Us had over 500 stores. By 2000, over 1,500 stores worldwide. The company controlled 20 to 25% of all toy sales in America. 1 out of every 4 toys sold in the country came from Toys R Us. Charles Lazarus had become a billionaire. The backwards R was as recognizable as McDonald's golden arches. In 1965, Toys R Us needed a mascot. Something friendly, something kids would love, something that made sense for a toy store. They created Geoffrey the Giraffe. The reasoning was practical and brilliant. Giraffes are tall enough to reach the highest shelves. In a store where toys were stacked 12 feet high, a giraffe made perfect sense. Geoffrey was drawn in a cartoon style with big friendly eyes and a warm smile, brown and yellow spots. He wore a blue shirt with the Toys R Us logo. He looked like someone you could trust, someone who wanted to help you find the perfect toy. Life-size Geoffrey statues appeared at store entrances. Kids posed for photos with him while parents waited in line. You could not walk past Geoffrey without stopping. It became part of the ritual. Arrive at Toys R Us, take photo with Geoffrey, enter the store. The giraffe was the gatekeeper to the kingdom. Geoffrey appeared in commercials, print ads, and billboards. He became more recognizable to American children than most cartoon characters. Ask a kid in 1980 who Geoffrey was, and they knew instantly. He was not just a mascot, he was a friend. He represented the promise that inside those doors, you would find exactly what you wanted. Then in 1982, Toys R Us launched a jingle that would define a generation. I don't want to grow up, I'm a Toys R Us kid. There's a million toys at Toys R Us that I can play with. The song was insidiously catchy. It played on television commercials, it played inside the stores, and it played on radio ads. You could not escape it. But more than catchy, it was emotionally perfect. Every child feels the tension between wanting to grow up and wanting to stay young. The jingle captured that perfectly. You can grow up without giving up the joy of play. You can be a Toys R Us kid forever. It was a promise that resonated deeply. Adults who grew up in the 1980s and 1990s can still sing the entire jingle from memory 30 years later. The backwards R and Geoffrey and that jingle formed a trinity of branding that made Toys R Us untouchable. It was not just a store, it was childhood itself. The 1980s and 1990s were the golden age. Toys R Us was printing money. The company was not just surviving, it was dominating. When a hot toy launched, Toys R Us got the biggest shipment. When kids wanted Cabbage Patch Kids or Transformers or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they went to Toys R Us because that is where the stock was. Walk into a store on a Saturday afternoon in 1989. The parking lot is full. Families are everywhere. A father and his son push a cart toward the action figure aisle. The boy is 9 years old. He has saved his allowance for 6 weeks, $12. He knows exactly what he wants, a Transformers Optimus Prime. They turn the corner into the aisle. The wall stretches 15 feet high with hundreds of action figures in boxes. The boy scans the shelves. His eyes move fast. G.I. Joe, He-Man, Star Wars. Then he sees it on the third shelf from the top, the red and blue box with Optimus Prime on the front. He points. His father nods and climbs the ladder kept at the end of every aisle for exactly this purpose. He reaches up, pulls the box down, and hands it to his son. The boy holds it like it is made of glass. The weight feels right. The plastic window shows the robot inside mid-transformation. He can already imagine it on his desk at home. His father checks the price tag, $11.99. The boy has exactly $12. They walk to the checkout. The boy does not let go of the box. Christmas season became legendary. Parents camped outside stores overnight when Tickle Me Elmo or Furby or Beanie Babies released. The lines wrapped around buildings. News cameras showed up to film the chaos. Toys R Us was the center of American consumer culture during the holidays. If you wanted the hot toy, you had no choice. Inside the stores, employees worked insane hours during November and December. Shelves were restocked constantly. Checkout lines stretched to the back of the store. The sound was overwhelming. Cartwheels on linoleum, kids crying or laughing, mothers calling out to children who had wandered off. The beeping of scanners never stopped. It was exhausting and exhilarating. The company made 30 to 40% of its annual revenue in those 2 months. Christmas was everything. But it was not just Christmas. Birthdays happened year-round. Parents came in constantly looking for gifts. Toys R Us had something for every age. Babies, toddlers, elementary school teenagers. You could furnish an entire childhood from that store. The selection was unmatched. Walmart and Target carried toys, but their selection was limited to the biggest sellers. Toys R Us carried everything: niche toys, educational toys, weird imports that no one else stocked. Employees took pride in the job. They were not just retail workers, they were toy experts. They knew which action figures were compatible with which play sets, they knew which board games were worth the price, and they helped parents who had no idea what their kids wanted. That expertise was valuable. It made Toys R Us more than just a warehouse. It made it a destination. By 1998, Charles Lazarus took Toys R Us public. The stock soared. Investors saw a company with dominant market share, strong brand recognition, and consistent profits. The future looked unlimited. Toys R Us had survived recessions, competition, and changing trends. It seemed indestructible. It was not. By the late 1990s, cracks were forming. Walmart had become the largest retailer in America, and they wanted toy market share. They started selling toys at cost, or even below cost, to drive traffic into stores. Parents could buy the same action figure at Walmart for $3 less than Toys R Us. For families on tight budgets, that mattered. Target took a different approach. They made their toy aisles cleaner, brighter, and hipper. They focused on design and aesthetics. Target felt modern. Toys R Us felt dated. The stores still had linoleum floors and fluorescent lights. The shelves were metal and industrial. It worked in 1980 when warehouse chic was novel. By 2000, it felt old. Toys R Us management knew the stores needed renovation. They needed better lighting, better flooring, and better displays. But renovations cost money, millions per store. The company was still profitable, but growth had slowed. Stock price was flat. Investors were getting impatient. Then in 2000, Toys R Us made a deal that seemed smart at the time but turned disastrous. They signed an exclusive agreement with Amazon to handle all online toy sales. Toys R Us would supply inventory, and Amazon would run the website and logistics. It seemed like a win. Toys R Us got an instant online presence without building the infrastructure. Amazon got a huge inventory partner. The problem was that Amazon learned everything about the toy business from that deal. They learned what sold, what margins looked like, and what suppliers to contact. In 2005, Amazon violated the exclusivity agreement and started selling toys directly. Toys R Us sued and won, but the damage was done. Amazon now knew how to compete in toys, and they were better at e-commerce than anyone. By 2005, Toys R Us was in trouble. Sales were declining, stores were shabby, competition was brutal. The company was still profitable operationally, making hundreds of millions per year, but it was not growing fast enough for Wall Street. The stock was stagnant. Management needed capital to renovate stores and compete online. They needed billions, they did not have it. That is when the vultures arrived. In 2005, 3 private equity firms approached Toys R Us with an offer. Kohlberg Kravis Roberts, Bain Capital, and Vornado proposed to buy the company for $6.6 billion. They would take it private, away from the pressures of quarterly earnings reports. They would invest in renovations, they would modernize operations, and they would reposition the brand for the 21st century. It sounded reasonable. Management and the board agreed. The deal closed in July 2005. Toys R Us was now owned by 3 private equity firms from New York. And here is where the crime happened. The private equity firms did not pay $6.6 billion out of their own money. They borrowed $5 billion from banks, then they made Toys R Us responsible for paying back that $5 billion loan. A warehouse worker in New Jersey was restocking shelves 2 weeks after the deal closed. He saw 2 men in suits walking the aisles with clipboards, taking notes. They were consultants. They stopped near him, talking quietly to each other. He kept working, but he could hear them. "How long until we flip this?" one asked. The other one shrugged. 5 years if we're lucky. Load the debt, extract the fees, sell it before it collapses. The first one laughed. "Think the employees know?" The other shook his head. "They never do." The worker thought they were joking. Dark humor, impossible to be serious. He went back to work. Years later, after the bankruptcy, he would remember that conversation. They had not been joking. This is called a leveraged buyout. You borrow money to buy a company, then make the company itself pay back the loan. It is legal. It is common. It is devastating. Toys R Us went from having manageable debt to having $5 billion in debt overnight. The annual interest payments alone were over $400 million. Think about what that means. $400 million per year that used to go towards store renovations, inventory, employee wages, and technology now went to banks. Money that could have modernized the stores went to servicing debt. Money that could have built a better website went to interest payments. Toys R Us was now competing against Amazon and Walmart with one hand tied behind its back. The private equity firms did not just load the company with debt. They also extracted fees: management fees, consulting fees, advisory fees, and monitoring fees. Over the next decade, KKR, Bain Capital, and Vornado took hundreds of millions of dollars out of Toys R Us, while the company struggled. They were paid regardless of whether Toys R Us succeeded. From 2005 to 2015, Toys R Us tried to compete while drowning in debt. Stores got shabbier because there was no money for renovations. Inventory selection shrank because suppliers demanded faster payment. Employees were overworked because there was no money to hire more staff. The website was terrible because there was no money to invest in technology. But the debt payments were always made on time. $400 million per year to the banks, every single year. The company was still operationally profitable. If you removed the debt payments, Toys R Us made money. But you cannot remove debt payments. The debt was real, it was crushing, and it was getting worse. By 2015, the total debt had grown to $5.3 billion. The company was worth less than its debt. On paper, Toys R Us was insolvent. Workers inside the stores watched this happen in real time. Consultants with clipboards and spreadsheets walked the aisles, timing how long tasks took and recommending cuts. Hours were reduced. Positions were eliminated. Employees who had worked there for 20 years were let go to save money. Meanwhile, the stores continued to decay. Ceiling tiles were stained, floors were scuffed, and bathrooms were outdated. It was death by 1,000 cuts. In September 2017, Toys R Us filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The plan was to reorganize, shed some of the debt close underperforming stores, and emerge leaner and stronger. It was not impossible. Many companies have successfully reorganized through bankruptcy. But Toys R Us had one fatal problem. The 2017 holiday season was approaching and vendors were terrified. Toy manufacturers like Hasbro and Mattel supply inventory on credit. They ship toys in September and October and get paid in January after Christmas sales. But if Toys R Us was in bankruptcy, would they get paid? The vendors were not sure. Many of them refused to ship inventory for the 2017 holiday season unless Toys R Us paid cash up front. Toys R Us did not have the cash. The shelves stayed empty. An empty toy store during Christmas is a dead toy store. Customers came in, saw bare shelves, and left. Sales collapsed. In January 2018, management announced that reorganization had failed. Toys R Us would liquidate. Every store in America would close. 33,000 workers received 60-day notices. Many of them had been with the company for decades. They received zero severance pay. The final liquidation sales began in January 2018 and lasted until June. Everything must go signs appeared in every window. 50% off, 70% off, 90% off. The stores that had once been kingdoms of toys were now being gutted. Fixtures sold, shelves sold, the metal racks where action figures hung, the ladder's employees climbed, the checkout counters, everything. Employees worked their final weeks helping customers while knowing their jobs were ending. Maria Rodriguez had worked at the store in Edison, New Jersey since 1987, 31 years behind the same register. She knew the regular families by name. She knew which kids collected Hot Wheels and which ones wanted only Barbies. She knew the parents who came in every birthday season looking for something special. On her last day, a Thursday in March, a woman she recognized came through her line. The woman had been bringing her children to this store for 15 years. Now, those children were teenagers. They did not come anymore. But the woman was here buying a gift for her nephew. She placed the items on the counter, a puzzle, a stuffed elephant, and a card. Maria scanned each item. Her hands were shaking. The register displayed the total. $83.42. The woman handed her a credit card. Maria swiped it. The receipt printed. She handed it over. Then she looked at the woman and her eyes filled with tears. She could not stop them. The woman saw. Her face changed. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't know this would be your last week." Maria nodded, unable to speak. She tried to smile, failed. "Me too," she finally managed. The woman reached across the counter and squeezed Maria's hand. "Thank you for everything. My kids loved coming here." Then she took her bags and left. Maria watched her walk away. She had 7 more hours on her shift. After that, she would drive home and figure out how to tell her husband that after 31 years, she was unemployed with 0 severance. She was 56 years old, too young to retire, too old for most places to hire. She did not know what came next. Store by store, the lights went dark. The backwards R signs came down. Workers carried boxes to their cars filled with name tags and photos and memories. Buildings that had been full of noise and color and life stood empty and silent. The last store to close was in Paramus, New Jersey. It had been one of the original flagship locations. On June 29, 2018, it locked its doors for the final time. Jeffrey's costume was put into storage. 33,000 people were unemployed. The company that had defined childhood for 50 years was dead. KKR, Bain Capital, and Vornado lost money on the deal. The equity they invested was wiped out, but they had already extracted hundreds of millions in fees over the previous 13 years. They walked away, bruised but not destroyed. The workers got nothing. Today, if you drive through American suburbs, you will see the ghosts. Massive empty buildings with faded paint where the Toys R Us logo used to be. Some have been demolished, some have been converted into other stores, many sit vacant, too large and too expensive for most retailers to use. In October, Spirit Halloween rents some of them temporarily, filling the corpses with costumes for a few weeks before they go dark again. The Toys R Us brand still exists, but barely. In 2019, a company bought the name and opened 2 small stores as experiments. They failed and closed. The brand is now licensed out. You can find Toys R Us sections inside Target and Macy's stores, small displays with the backwards R logo. It is not the same. It will never be the same. But Jeffrey survived. Every Thanksgiving, he appears in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, a giant balloon version of the giraffe floating down the street in front of millions of people. Kids watching on television ask their parents who that is. Parents who grew up in the 1980s and 1990s explain that it used to be a store. It was the best store. You could spend hours there and never get bored. It had everything you ever wanted. Then one day it was gone. The jingle survived too. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. Adults in their 30s and 40s still sing it. Some of them sang it at the funerals of parents who took them to Toys R Us as children. The song outlived the store. The memory outlived the company. There are 3 lessons here, and they are not comforting. First lesson, private equity can destroy profitable companies legally. Toys R Us was operationally profitable when KKR, Bain Capital, and Vornado bought it. The company made money, it served customers, and it employed 33,000 people. The private equity firms loaded it with $5 billion in debt, extracted hundreds of millions in fees, and walked away when it collapsed. This is legal. This happens constantly. The workers who lost their jobs got nothing. The executives who made the decisions were paid millions. The system is designed this way. Second lesson, nostalgia cannot save a company that cannot invest. Every parent who grew up with Toys R Us wanted to take their kids there. They wanted their children to experience what they experienced. But the stores were too shabby, the selection was too limited, and the website was too broken. Brand love means nothing if the product experience is dead. Nostalgia is not enough. You have to deliver. Third lesson. Some things should not be run by spreadsheets. The people who killed Toys R Us never walked those aisles as kids. They never begged their parents for one more toy. They never posed for photos with Jeffrey. They never sang the jingle. They saw line items on balance sheets, debt service payments, interest coverage ratios, quarterly performance metrics. They optimized the numbers and destroyed the thing the numbers were supposed to measure. You cannot quantify what it felt like to be 7 years old walking into Toys R Us on a Saturday morning with your whole life ahead of you and infinite possibilities on the shelves. But that feeling was real. It mattered. And it is gone now. Jeffrey still waves from the Macy's parade balloon every Thanksgiving. Kids ask their parents who he is. Parents try to explain. That used to be a store. It was called Toys R Us. The R was backwards, like a kid wrote it. There was a giraffe named Jeffrey at the entrance. You could find any toy you wanted. It was magic. Then people who only cared about money decided it was worth more dead than alive. So they killed it. And we lost something we did not know we could lose. The giraffe outlived the empire. The jingle outlived the company. And somewhere right now, a 40-year-old is watching the parade singing, "I don't want to grow up," realizing that is exactly what happened. We grew up. And when we did, we discovered that the grown-ups who ran the world had sold our childhood for parts.